Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 390. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to help support and inspire new trauma workers through this podcast and my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. Thanks so much for joining me today, and here we go. Hey folks, Guy here. Quickly before we get started, after having done over 380 interviews with the amazing guests that I am fortunate to bring on this podcast, one of the themes that continually comes up again and again and again is the importance of self-awareness, of authenticity, of presence and vulnerability, and how to cultivate that. This topic is my passion. It inspires me. Why? Because it's something that I've been on a journey to do, and all within the context of working with people who've been impacted by trauma. I want to invite you to join me for a live workshop September 20th through 22nd at the Incredible Art of Living Retreat Center in Boone, North Carolina. Once again, that's September 20th through 22nd. You can get all the information by going to theheartcenteredworkshop.com. That's theheartcenteredworkshop.com. I will see you there. What's the point of having a beautiful website if it doesn't attract the clients you want to see? As worldwide leaders of website design for therapists, Brighter Vision sees this issue happening way too often. A nice looking website doesn't equate to a successful website. The truth is, your current website might actually even be turning off potential clients. That's where Brighter Vision comes in. Brighter Vision's team of website designers will create you a website that is centered around attracting and retaining your ideal client, so that you can have a nice looking website as well as a successful one. Better yet, Brighter Vision is offering 1 month free for Trauma Therapist Podcast listeners. To take advantage of this offer, simply go to brightervision.com/guy. Once again, brightervision.com/guy. Trauma may be a fact of life, but it doesn't have to be a life sentence. Somatic experiencing is a psychobiological method of addressing clients' physical and emotional trauma conditions and helps to give voice to their experiences without a need for them to retell their story. SE is a complementary modality that focuses on regulation of the nervous system and offers the opportunity to engage, complete, and resolve the body's instinctual responses to traumatic experiences. For more information regarding somatic experiencing and the SE professional training program, please visit www.traumahealing.org. That's www.traumahealing.org. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I'm very excited to have as my guest today, Mary Cortani. Mary, welcome.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
All right. So Mary Cortani is a Vietnam-era veteran and a certified Army Master of Canine Education. She's been training dogs for more than 35 years, starting in the military where she prepared dogs for work in sentry and explosive detection. In 2010, a former Marine approached Mary seeking assistance in acquiring a service dog to help him overcome anxiety disorders caused by combat hyper-vigilance. The multi-year waiting lists for trained dogs from existing organizations were just one more source of frustration for the returning vet. Mary knew that she could leverage her extensive dog training experience to train that vet to train his own service dog. She also realized that there are thousands of other dogs waiting for loving homes and that many of them have the right temperament for service work. Those factors combined to form a strategy that would dramatically reduce the waiting time. This approach turned out to do so much more. It gave the vet a sense of mission and purpose, and as the training proceeded, it provided a sense of accomplishment and renewed confidence as well. Thus was born the Operation Freedom Paws program, and for Mary, the alignment of her skill set, her capacity as a gifted leader, and her life purpose. Bam! Welcome. Thanks so much. Before we get going here, Mary, share with our listeners where you're from and where you're calling from, and let's dive in.
Okay, so again, my name is Mary Cortani, and I'm calling from San Martin, California. So I live in the Gilroy area.
Okay.
Right in between Morgan Hill and Gilroy. And what was the second part of that?
Where are you from originally?
Where am I? I'm a California native.
Nice.
So I grew up in Santa Cruz, and it gave me a unique perspective of the world, which I carry with me to this day.
Nice. So, as a lot of our listeners might know, I bring on people in this podcast who are passionate about helping people who've been impacted by trauma. A large component of that, and really one of the things that compelled me to do this, was the fact that my brother was a Navy SEAL who came back from Iraq, just jacked up with PTSD. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to create this podcast. And as a result, I've invited a lot of military personnel on who are working as therapists. I invited therapists who are dedicated their lives to helping, veterans and so forth. And you are amazing, and what you're doing is just so inspiring. And so I wanted to have you on here. So take us through, how did you get into this program? And I love the name of your program, Operation Freedom Paws, by the way.
Oh, thank you. So being a veteran, I served for 9 years on active duty. And when we get out of the military, it's a hard enough transition, because while we're serving, our worlds are black and white. We don't think about the basic needs of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And everything is taken care of, your food, your shelter, everything, right? You get a paycheck. And so that foundation of that pyramid is really, really strong. So just getting out, the transition is so tough, because you don't know how to take the military language, which is a whole bunch of acronyms, and your skill set, and translate it into a resume that an employer is going to say, oh, wow, I got to have that, with a few exceptions. And especially back when I got out in 84, it really wasn't the case, right? So I was lost. I got a little bit of depression, feeling kind of down, and finally worked my way through it, got into school, got a job, got my feet underneath me. And so because of the dedication to job, sense of detail, paying attention to those details, it was very easy to excel in the high-tech world. Mm-hmm. So I worked my way up, and eventually, moving many years forward, was an executive for a startup. And all of a sudden, I'm older, and there's this new transition, because for the first time in my life, I'm being let go. It's not my choice. And so being older, being in that type of position, being female, it's much harder to find. And it reminded me of the struggles that I had when I was in the service, being a female veteran. So I got, down on myself again. I'd lost my confidence. But the one thing I never stopped doing throughout was training dogs, whether it was for family, friends, search and rescue, my own pets. And so to reinvent myself one more time, I said, what the heck, I'm going to open a dog training business. And, it's easy to train the dog, it's the people. But I knew that I had those skill sets from training military personnel to handle dogs and do their jobs in the service. And my career as a manager throughout my lifetime, okay, I can do this. So I did that, and that's when I got the call. And it was right around between Christmas of 2009 and New Year's of 2010, from this Marine who, if you have ever spoken to someone who is suicidal, even on the phone, you can tell. You can hear that desperation. You can hear that loss of hope. And so we talked for several times over that period, because, I'm familiar with mobility assistance dogs and guide dogs at the time, but I really didn't know about the psychiatric service dogs or what tasks they would have to perform, because I did know a service dog had to perform tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And so in talking with him, I realized that somebody needed to step up, otherwise he wasn't going to be here today. And I said, look, I'll give it my best shot. If you're willing to go on this journey with me, we'll do it together, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can find the dog, because I had learned, most people don't know, Uncle Sam goes out into communities, goes to shelters, and finds a good portion of their dogs. At least they did when I served. And I think they still do that to some degree today, even though they're breeding. And the dog program in the military is a little different than it was when I served. But you have to look at the characteristics of the dog, and it's a lot of different things. It's personality, it's temperament, it's willingness to do work, it's confidence, right? And then for the military, of course, it also had to do with some aggression, and could it be controlled and things like that. So they said, all right, well, what do I need to do to translate that into a service dog? And the main thing, which was very different than the military, was that the dog has to have a strong desire to focus on that person. It's got to want to be with that person more than wanting to be with other dogs, with other people. And so I started diving into it. Then it was, okay, well, what issues are our veterans facing? And mind you, I'm saying veterans. I'm not saying OIF. I'm not saying OEF. A veteran is a veteran. And I feel that very passionately, because female veterans got overlooked for a really long time and still kind of get the short end of the stick. So in trying to design the program and working with, Matt in the beginning, a lot of it was trial and error as to, I knew the dog would help. I mean, just from my own personal life experiences. But what was it that he really needed to help him to be able to navigate life? And doing the research and, the nightmares and the flashbacks and the triggers and avoiding crowds, not wanting to go out, the isolation, the hyper-vigilance, all of those things. What can we take in a dog's normal temperament and behavior and modify into a task to help the individual get through it? So we did that. But as we went through, and I'm happy to say that Matt today is thriving. He's gone back to school. He's moved to another state with his family. He's working part-time, and he's doing amazing, right? But that led me to say, okay, the dog is one piece to this puzzle. And, it sounds kind of cruel when I say the dog is a tool, because it's so much more, but it really is a tool, right? It's what I've come to learn over the years is that it's a cognitive behavior changer, right? And to give you an example, the very first thing they have to learn to do is communicate with the dog. Well, if they've been isolating and they've been hyper-vigilant and they've cut off themselves from their family because they don't want to share what's going on with them that's so dark and so overwhelming to them, and that communication stops, you're on the verge of divorce. You've isolated yourself from the one support system that might be there. It isn't always with regards to family. But so by learning to train the dog, which is why I put this model together, they have to communicate with the dog. They have to give it commands. They have to give it praise. They have to tell it what they expect, right? And they have to interact with it. That immediately translates into, they've got to, people see them with the dog and it's like, oh, wow, that's a really cool dog. And they start talking about the dog, and that bridge of communication just begins to open up. And what we've seen over the years is with our veteran clients is, they go to the therapy or they go to the psychiatrist or psychologist inside of the VA, and there's no trust. Right? So they don't tell them everything because there's a fear that here they are fighting for their benefits, it might get stripped away. So they only open up so much. Well, now that they go in with the dog, all of a sudden, they read the dog to say, hey, is this a good person or not? And a good percentage of them start opening up and really diving deep down. So when I recognized that early on, we lengthened the program and we brought in licensed therapists. So whether they're family therapists or they're individual therapists who have a passion and a desire to help our clients move forward. So 80% of what we do is with the veterans. The other 20% is made up of children and adults. And I say it in that order for a reason, because our priority is to bring in veterans, followed by kids, followed by adults with disabilities, and it's all based on funding. All right. I never wanted that waiting list that traditional organization had. Unfortunately, we got overwhelmed and are still overwhelmed with receiving applications from people needing assistance. And it comes down to money, because for the first, 20 months, it was family, friends, and my savings that did this. And it costs on average between $15,000 and $17,000 per dog team. And in that first year, before we were even a nonprofit, we were already up to 30 clients. So I'm happy to announce today that we have 392 clients and are on track to hit 400 by our wine gala coming up on August 10th. So, you do the math on that, right? And in that 20 months, I couldn't raise funds. Friends could donate, but they couldn't get a tax donation. And so in September of 2011, becoming a nonprofit, that opened the door for support. But the bottom line is, go ahead.
Let me just jump in here for a second. So a couple of questions. First of all, when you were in the military, or even before you got into the military, were you into dogs? When did this passion start?
I grew up with dogs. I've loved animals. I was that kid that brought home every stray, including the bird with the broken wing. I had a neighbor who had a guide dog, and it was really cool because he'd get his mail and I'd get a dime per letter for reading his mail to him, which helped me with my reading, right? But in that, I got to see the relationship that he had with that guide dog, and how by that dog being his eyes, how his world opened up. And we talked about it, even when I was young, it made a lasting impression. And when so I had a situation in my life. I came from a dysfunctional family, and I was put in a foster home when I was 14 years old. Being an only child, being thrown into a home with 12 other kids was in and of itself traumatic, right? Trauma is trauma. It can happen in many different forms. And we don't understand resiliency, right? I don't understand resiliency. I think if we could, it'd be that piece of magic to unlock a lot of things. But I knew coming out of high school, I was going into the military. I had made my mind up that I wanted to go into law enforcement, and I wanted to work with dogs. Well, lo and behold, the Army had an MP canine handler as a MOS, which means military occupational skill, for those that don't understand. And so that's what I enlisted for, right? So that passion, being around animals and kind of knowing what I wanted, all came together for me to go into the service.
Wow. So, and you talked about Matt being the gentleman who initially called you in 2010, and you said on the phone he sounded suicidal, right? He was the initial guy in a sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. How did he find out about you?
How he found out about me, because Operation Freedom Paws was not in existence at that time. I had a dog training business called Canine Coach Plus, and he was calling as a last effort trainers all over the place, right? And he just wanted a trainer to work with him. He was even willing to just go buy a dog. He would scrape the money together. He just knew he needed this. And people that he talked to were like, well, yeah, you know, it can cost you $5,000. It can cost you $10,000. It can cost you $20,000. And he didn't have that kind of money, right? He's trying to hold his family together. He's trying to fight for his benefits. And everybody wanted something. Oh, I'm not gonna do this for you at no cost, right? You got to pay me. And they weren't hearing him. And I think that was one of the things I really heard was, you know, the desperation in his voice, that being hopeless, you know, and being a veteran, I think I was able to connect with him in a way that maybe some of the other people couldn't, you know, by saying, okay, what was your ETS? When did you serve? You know, were you deployed? Were you in theater? I didn't, you know, say, and I'm just going to say this because it's the one thing you should never say to a veteran, especially a combat veteran, is, did you kill anybody? Right? That is, it's like, please, people, don't do that. It sets them so far back, and we'll talk about that because I really want to address the moral injury side of things too. But being able to bring him back and joke a little bit about bouncing quarters off of racks, right? Or, you know, talk about that there is a life after, and that even for myself, not being injured or disabled, I had a struggle with the transition, and talking about the world being black and white and how we don't know how to navigate the gray. And that's really what civilian life is. And how we now have to learn how to provide it for ourselves in a different way. It's not just about the paycheck, but it's about the roof over your head and the medical and the clothes, right? And that basic rung on the pyramid. So I was able to draw him out and get him to open up a little bit so that he was able to tell me about the nightmares and how he would go for 3-4 days without sleeping. And then he'd crash for a couple of hours, but a nightmare would wake him up. And how, you know, he was, you know, in that 2 hours of sleep one night, he, you know, almost tried to strangle his wife. And that he doesn't want to be that person. And if he can't change and find some help, then he doesn't think he can be here tomorrow. And that's, you know, as you go and you hear that, it's like, okay, you got to do something now. And just putting him in to a treatment ward or a treatment program isn't necessarily the answer, right? Because there's got to be able to be related to. So that was what really catapulted it, I think, and said, no, and diving in, finding out what post-traumatic stress was, TBIs, military sexual trauma. I mean, all these things that we don't talk about, right? Mental health in general.
Yeah. You're bringing up a lot of good points. So who do you provide dogs to? Because obviously there are service dogs, and correct me if I'm wrong, in order for someone to get a service dog, doesn't someone have to be diagnosed formally have a formal diagnosis of depression or PTSD, and they have to, is that right or wrong?
No, absolutely. So it must be an MD. All right. So we won't accept anyone.
I didn't get that. It must be
an
what?
MD.
An MD.
An MD. Okay. Yeah. So either a psychiatrist or a medical doctor who can write a prescription, because that's really what the service dog is. It's as if they wrote you a prescription for pain medication, a wheelchair, crutches, a prosthetic. That service dog is no different than that piece of medical equipment. And that's where folks really don't understand that, right? There is a medical need for this dog to be with this person. It's not somebody wanting to take their pet with them all the time and pass it off as a fake service dog.
Right.
right? It's making their quality of life better. And it's giving them that sense of independence, just like that wheelchair allows them to move around. The dog is allowing them to move around.
Okay. And I'm not judging people who want to take their dogs everywhere, because I think that's great. I was just getting clarification on who you're providing these dogs to specifically. So, and my guess would be that most, if not all, of the veterans who are coming to see you really need this.
Yeah, and it's, it's not just one diagnosis. What we found over doing this now for almost 10 years, because at the end of this year, it'll be, 10 years, and it'll be 8 as a nonprofit come September, is that it's not just one thing. And it's not just post-traumatic stress, and it's whatever you want to say, traditional terms or defined terms. It's very complex, and it's complex post-traumatic stress, or it's a combination of post-traumatic stress with mobility, or post-traumatic stress with epilepsy because of a TBI, or the TBI with memory. So it's a gambit, and it's not just one thing. Right. If they're diagnosed with just depression, we don't see that as much. It's more the severe, where the trauma has really had an impact and really changed that brain, that they need something else to help them to navigate life.
Just want to remind everyone that I'm speaking with Mary Cortani. Her nonprofit is called Operation Freedom Paws. Mary, you brought up moral injury. Let's talk about that.
Oh, wow. So it's something that we don't talk about, right? There's been a little bit of talk, but we don't really, I don't think we want to acknowledge it. And I'll try and surmise in my layman's terms, because I'm not a clinician, I'm not a doctor, right? I'm just going off of my experience and what I've learned. We grow up and we're taught values, right? And we're taught morals. And if religion is part of our life, we're taught things like thou shalt not kill, love thy neighbor, and to treat other people, as you would want to be treated, right? So now fast forward, and you're in the military, and they tear you down, they build you up to do the job that you need to do. And you still have those things pretty much intact, because they're part of your core being, right? Your values and your morals become part of you. And now, something happens, whether it is war, whether it is an attack, whether it's law enforcement, because it's not just our military that are affected by this. Moral injury affects a lot of different folks, but your first responders, your law enforcement, the military. And now you actually have to shoot someone, or you harm someone, right? It begins to eat away at that moral side of you, and you become kind of numb, because you're now burying it, and we don't know how to resolve it, right? And the more it happens, which is what really happens in combat, or if there's a really bad situations, like with the school shootings and things like that, right? You have to dig really deep with no outlet on how to begin the healing of your soul and of your spirit, and bring back those values without becoming so numb that in turn it causes you harm, which is why we see, higher suicide rates now with first responders and law enforcement, and not just our military. So it's a combination of the actual maybe physical injury to the brain, right, with the post-traumatic stress, but I think it's also the moral side injuring the actual being and who they really are, and they begin to question themselves.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up a really good topic. Do you address this topic in your organization somehow?
We do, and it without being blatant and in their face about it. So what we do is very different than a traditional service dog program. So you mentioned earlier how we train them to train their dog. Well, we're training them to train the dog for their very specific needs. So it's not like a cookie cutter approach, right? If they have post-traumatic stress and they have diabetes, the dog is going to be trained to detect the diabetes and manage the post-traumatic stress. If they have mobility, then the dog's going to be trained for mobility, right? But as we're going through and doing that, and the base of all of it has to do with obedience in the dog and building that relationship and that bond and the communication, getting the dog to focus on them. But then you throw in, we have the therapists available. But here's another key to the moral injury side. For our veterans and that not wanting to talk to their families, they don't want to share the horrors that they've seen or experienced or be judged by their family because of some of the things they've had to do, right? Especially if their parents are religious, right? And they don't want to cause them harm. They don't want to put that burden on to them. So we include the families. We, the spouses, the parents, the siblings. Please come join training. Come hang out. Use our support groups because we have a spousal support group. Wow. The kids, depending upon the age, and we've seen this several times throughout the program, when they're hanging around, they go off and they gravitate towards playing with each other, right? So you'll get a mix. Even the older kids will go, kind of help watch the younger kids, right, and interact with them. Well, and I'll share a specific story with you. We had a 9-year-old girl whose father was really, really struggling. And he was trying to, he was really, really trying to change. And so she witnessed him trying to self-medicate and be an alcoholic and, almost strangling his wife, or, if he would get mad to the point where he'd punch the wall instead of punching her, and then he'd leave, and what would he do? He'd go drink more, right? And then he'd come home and he'd pass out. And this was Daddy's little girl before he came home changed. Mm-hmm. And so when his psychiatrist at the VA said, you really need a service dog and we need you to be doing, these 3 things. And he really wanted to get off the medication because he was now, sober. He didn't want to become addicted to the opioids and all these pills. So he listened to a psychiatrist, which is how he reached out to us. And having gone through the program, one of the other things that we do is we can help facilitate conversation between family members by having a therapist in the room. And so we actually got to the point where one of our other clients, their granddaughter, who knew what it was like to watch her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran, have post-traumatic stress, and how he changed by being part of this program. She was able to talk to this, 9-year-old girl who 2 years before was scared to death to be anywhere in the room with her dad, right? Or what would happen if he came home drunk. And that conversation opened and they talked candidly, right? And so now she's realizing, hey, I'm not the only one whose parent came home changed, and that there's hope, right? Because the granddaughter was able to say, you'll see your dad change. You'll see that the dog is going to help, and the dog's going to help you because you're going to be able to read the dog when he's having a bad day, right? And you can say, hey, Daddy, I love you. I know you're having a bad day, but it'll get better. Where instead of running away. And that to me is amazing. right? Because that addresses the moral side of things, right? He doesn't want to harm his family. He doesn't want to harm his daughter. This was daddy's little girl, and the guilt, that goes along with that eats away at his core being, now has a chance to heal. Well, the rest of that story is that after that conversation, this client came, veteran came to me and said, Mary, can you help me to sit down with my daughter? I need her to know that I never wanted to harm her or her mom, and that I was really sick and that I'm trying to get better. And so we did. We sat them down, right? And I asked if they wanted a therapist in the room, and they said, no, Mary, we want you because we know you'll help explain it, right? And the next thing I know is we're talking, and this particular client had told me something that he really wanted to say to her, but wasn't able to because of the guilt, right? And asked me to help him to facilitate it. So we go through, and it's what was supposed to be like a half-hour conversation turned into 2 hours. And at the end of it, the box of tissues was almost gone, but they got up and they hugged, and it was a genuine hug. And it was, it just like this weight got taken off of both of their shoulders. And now they're doing daddy-daughter things all over again. That, and it's still got a ways to go, but the healing is beginning to take place.
Yeah, I mean, what a beautiful, inspiring story. I just want to be mindful of the time here, and we didn't even touch on the fact that in 2012 you were made a CNN hero, which is really amazing. I mean, the people who are awarded that are incredibly inspiring. Just touch upon that, and for those listeners maybe who aren't too familiar with that, share how that all came about.
Oh my goodness. So it was an amazing honor. I'm still honored today that I was selected as a top 10 CNN hero. It came about because in early 2012, one of my customers, so I mix the public with our veterans for the first hour of training, to show them they can be out around, what we call civilians. She had been watching this even before we became a nonprofit. And she decided to write into CNN Heroes. And she wrote an amazing letter, which is partly on the award from CNN. And I like to say it's like getting a top secret clearance, because they really vet before they even select you to be a CNN hero. And so get through all of that. I'm selected as a CNN hero, which is, I think that's one of 20 that they do throughout the year. And that in of itself was an amazing experience, because it brings awareness, right? You get TV coverage that you couldn't buy. And it brings awareness to the issue that you're trying to address. And then it goes into what I call the popularity contest, where not yet. So they have a committee that sits down sometime in the September timeframe and selects out of those 22 who they want to be the top 10. And they have a whole set of guidelines that they use for that. If you're selected for that, then it goes out to the public, and I call it the popularity contest. How many votes can you get, right? And so then you're asking for support from everybody. But even that process was amazing, because the outpouring, the people that were voting, people started to donate a little bit more. We weren't aware that would create an increase in the donations. But out of that also came an awareness of what other people out in the world are trying to do to make this world a better place. And I have to say, the 10 people that I stood on stage with, that I shared, 2012 with, are amazing, and they're around the world,
Yeah.
and being able to spend a week with them and get to know them, and we're, half of them I'm still in contact with today. That it reminded me that you got to have the drive, you got to have the passion, but when you have an open heart and can see the differences in people, but accept those differences and not judge the book by its cover, that there's a whole amazing individual inside of there. And I carry that with me even to this day.
Well, I mean, come on, man. Congratulations. It is amazing. And you're so friggin' inspiring, and the work you're doing is incredible. I mean, we could go on and on talking about the many topics we just touched upon, but I want to stop here and just thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I do want to give people the opportunity to support you. So if people are interested in supporting you, donating to your organization, how can they do that?
Oh, our website, operationfreedompaws.org.
Okay.
There's a donate button on there. And thank you for bringing that up, because in the world that we're living in today, donations are down 50% compared to what they were 2 years ago. And, we're really struggling to be able to continue to do what we do. So they can donate right through. It's a very secure. We use Network for the Good. They can write a check, put it in the mail. Our address is on our website. But yeah.
Okay, and I'll have the link up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Mary, I want to thank you so much for, again, taking the time to do this. Just awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for doing the podcast to help bring awareness to, what trauma is and what mental health and what we need to do to make the world a better place. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Take care.
You too.
The Foundation for Human Enrichment, DBA Somatic Experiencing Trauma Institute, is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to resolving trauma worldwide by providing professional training and education in somatic experiencing. It was founded by Dr. Peter Levine, author of Waking the Tiger, who developed somatic experiencing based on explorations of how animals deal with threat and traumatic experiences on a daily basis. Learn more about somatic experiencing and the SE professional training at www.traumahealing.org. That's www.traumahealing.org. What's the point of having a beautiful website if it doesn't attract the clients you want to see? As worldwide leaders of website design for therapists, Brighter Vision sees this issue happening way too often. A nice looking website doesn't equate to a successful website. The truth is, your current website might actually even be turning off potential clients. That's where Brighter Vision comes in. Brighter Vision's team of website designers will create your website that is centered around attracting and retaining your ideal client, so that you can have a nice looking website as well as a successful one. Better yet, Brighter Vision is offering 1 month free for Trauma Therapist Podcast listeners. To take advantage of this offer, simply go to brightervision.com/guy. Once again, brightervision.com/guy.